Eleanor Cross had mastered timing. She knew when to enter a boardroom so silence fell instantly. She knew when to pause in negotiations so billion-dollar men leaned forward. She knew when to arrive late enough to seem powerful, but not careless. What she didn't know was how to arrive early. That afternoon, the meeting ended before it was supposed to. The acquisition stalled. Lawyers argued. Eleanor stood, closed her laptop, and walked out without explanation. Her driver looked surprised when she gave him a different address. Home, she said. The word felt strange in her mouth. The penthouse tower rose like a monument to her success. Glass, steel, privacy. No paparazzi. No noise. No warmth either. Eleanor stepped out of the elevator alone, heels clicking against marble that never echoed with laughter. She expected crying. Her daughter was 7 months old. Crying was constant. Nannies rotated. Schedules changed. Nothing worked for long. Eleanor had hired Daniel Reed only 2 weeks earlier, a temporary solution after her last caregiver quit, overwhelmed. A single dad. That had stood out, not impressive degrees. Not elite references. Just honesty. Still, Eleanor had barely noticed him since hiring. She paid people so she wouldn't have to, but today, the apartment was quiet, too quiet. Her chest tightened as she moved down the hallway. She imagined worst-case scenarios: baby asleep too long, nanny distracted, emergencies handled without her knowing. Then she heard it. A man humming, soft. Off-key. Human. Eleanor stopped walking. The sound came from the nursery. Her hand lifted instinctively, then froze inches from the doorframe. She leaned slightly, unseen. Daniel stood near the crib, barefoot, sleeves rolled up. He held her baby against his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. One arm firm and protective, the other tilting a bottle just enough so no air bubbles formed. The baby wasn't crying, she wasn't restless, she was calm. Her tiny hand clutched Daniel's shirt, fingers opening and closing in sleep. Daniel whispered something, maybe nonsense, maybe a promise. Eleanor couldn't hear the words, but she felt their weight. Her throat closed. Eleanor Cross had never seen her daughter like this, not with doctors, not with nannies, not even in her own arms. The realization hit her harder than any business loss. She took a step back without meaning to. The floor creaked. Daniel looked up, his eyes widened. Panic flickered across his face, like a child caught breaking rules he never meant to break. "Oh, Ms. Cross," he said quietly, not moving the baby. "I didn't hear the elevator." Eleanor couldn't speak. Her mind screamed questions, accusations, authority, but her heart was frozen in a moment she wasn't prepared for. "How long?" she finally said, her voice sharp from disuse. "Have you been doing this?" Daniel hesitated. He gently laid the baby back in the crib, adjusted the blanket, waited until her breathing evened out. "Every feeding," he answered. "Especially at night." Eleanor crossed her arms. "A defense mechanism. You were hired to assist," she said. "Not replace." Daniel met her gaze, not challenging, not afraid. "I'm not replacing anyone," he said. "I'm staying." That word again, staying. Eleanor glanced at the baby monitor. No alerts. No logs of crying. No emergency calls. For the first time since becoming a mother, the system showed peace. Something inside her cracked quietly. She turned away before Daniel could see it. Backhand index pointing right. If this moment pulled you in, subscribe now. Stories like this remind us that life's biggest turns happen behind closed doors. Eleanor Cross did not sleep that night, not because her baby cried, but because she didn't. The penthouse, usually a fortress of silence she welcomed after brutal days, felt different now, too aware, too alive. Eleanor lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the image again and again. Daniel, her baby, that look of peace she had never been able to create herself. At 3:17 a.m., Eleanor checked the nursery camera. Her daughter slept soundly. No rocking. No pacing. No emergency bottle requests, just rest. Eleanor's chest tightened with something dangerously close to guilt. She had built empires while missing moments she could never buy back. At 6 a.m., she rose, not for a meeting, not for investors, for the First time in years, for curiosity, she padded quietly toward the kitchen. The smell of something warm stopped her. Toast. Not the catered kind. Real toast. And coffee, strong, simple, unpretentious. Daniel stood at the counter, shoulders slightly slumped from exhaustion, packing a small lunchbox decorated with faded cartoon stickers that he froze when he noticed her. "Good morning," he said carefully. Eleanor nodded. "You're up early." He smiled faintly. "Always am." She watched him for a moment. Not as an employer, but as a woman trying to understand a world she'd ignored. "That lunch," she said. "Is that for my daughter?" Daniel shook his head. "My son. I leave it with the neighbor before he goes to school." Eleanor blinked. "You have a child, here?" He hesitated. "I didn't want to overstep. I keep him in the guest room when he stays. He's quiet." The word quiet again. Eleanor thought of her own child, surrounded by staff yet lonely. "How old?" she asked. "6, Daniel replied. "Old enough to understand when adults are tired. Too young to understand why." That landed hard. Eleanor sat down. "I saw you last night," she said. "Feeding her." Daniel's grip tightened on the lunchbox handle. "If you want me gone." "No," she said quickly. The urgency in her own voice surprised her. "I want to understand." He nodded slowly and sat across from her. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," Daniel said. "Cancer. No warning. No mercy." Eleanor listened. "I didn't have money. I didn't have time to grieve. I had a baby who needed feeding and a boy who needed answers I didn't have." His voice didn't shake. "That was what made it worse. I learned that kids don't need perfection," he continued. "They need presence. They need someone who stays even when they're exhausted." Eleanor swallowed. She remembered signing contracts from a hospital bed, returning calls hours after childbirth, telling herself it was temporary. Temporary had become permanent. "My daughter doesn't calm down for anyone," Eleanor admitted. "Not even me." Daniel met her eyes gently. "She doesn't need calming. She needs knowing someone's there." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but revealing. For the first time, Eleanor Cross felt like the least experienced person in the room. "What would you do," she asked quietly, "if you were me?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. "I'd sit on the floor," he said finally. "I'd miss a meeting. I'd let her see your face when she cries." Eleanor almost laughed. "I run a multinational company." "And she runs your heart," Daniel replied. "You just haven't let her yet." That was it, the sentence that cracked something open she'd welded shut years ago. Later that morning, Eleanor did something unthinkable. She canceled a meeting, then another. She walked into the nursery, sat on the floor, awkward, unsure, and picked up her daughter without handing her off to anyone else. The baby cried, then stopped, slowly. Eleanor's hands shook. Daniel watched from the doorway, saying nothing. By noon, the world hadn't ended, stocks hadn't crashed, the company hadn't burned, but something else had begun. Backhand index pointing right. If this chapter is touching your heart, subscribe now. These stories aren't just fiction, they're reminders of what truly matters. The headlines didn't break the way Eleanor Cross expected. They didn't talk about her latest acquisition, they didn't analyze her stock movements, they talked about her absence. Billionaire CEO cancels major summit, no official statement. Eleanor Cross missing from investor conference. Is the tech titan stepping down? Eleanor read none of it. She was on the nursery floor, her back against the crib, her daughter asleep on her chest for the second time that day. Her arm was numb, her heart was full. Daniel stood quietly nearby, pretending to organize toys he'd already organized twice. He watched Eleanor with something between relief and fear, relief that she was finally present, fear that this moment wouldn't last. Eleanor broke the silence. "I used to believe power meant control," she said softly. "Control of time. Of people. Of outcomes." Daniel didn't interrupt. "Now I realize," she continued, "power is choosing what you refuse to miss." That afternoon, Eleanor made a decision that sent shockwaves through her company. She called an emergency board meeting, not to apologize, not to explain, but to announce a restructuring. "I'm not stepping down," she told them calmly. "But I am stepping back." "Silence." "I built this company to create freedom," she said. "Somewhere along the way, I lost mine." Investors panicked. Advisors warned her. Lawyers begged her to reconsider. Eleanor ended the call with one sentence: "My daughter will not grow up remembering assistants instead of her mother." The backlash was immediate. Stocks dipped. Social media exploded. Commentators mocked her, until photos leaked, not staged, not polished, just Eleanor Cross sitting on the floor of her penthouse nursery, barefoot, hair undone, feeding her baby while a man in a worn sweater helped a little boy with homework nearby. The internet froze. Who is the man? Is the billionaire secretly married? A nanny scandal? Daniel saw the photos first. "I can leave," he said quietly that night. "I don't want to cost you anything." Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him. "You didn't cost me," she said. "You saved me." She walked to the door, locked it, and turned back. "I've spent my whole life protecting my image," she continued. "I won't protect it at the cost of my family." Family. Daniel swallowed hard. For the first time since his wife died, the word didn't hurt as much. Weeks passed, the media storm faded, something unexpected happened instead. Mothers wrote letters, fathers shared stories, employees thanked her. Productivity didn't drop. It improved, because Eleanor led differently now. At night, when the penthouse lights dimmed, Daniel's son would read to Eleanor's daughter. Eleanor would listen from the doorway, tears slipping freely, no longer ashamed of them. One evening, after both children were asleep, Eleanor and Daniel sat on the couch in silence. "I don't know what this is," Eleanor said honestly. Daniel nodded. "Neither do I. But I know," she continued, "I don't want to lose it." Daniel met her eyes. "Then don't." Months later, Eleanor would give a speech, her most famous one. She didn't talk about profits, she talked about the day she walked in on a single dad feeding her baby, and realized she had outsourced the most important part of her life. "That man," she said, voice steady, "reminded me that love doesn't clock out." The audience stood. At home that night, Eleanor kissed her daughter's forehead. Daniel turned off the light, and for the first time, the penthouse felt like what she'd been calling it all along: home. Backhand index pointing right. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. These stories aren't just about love, they're about choosing what truly matters before it's too late.